In my opinion, the Atlanta Hawks have had one of the most interesting years out of any other team in the NBA, as crazy as that sounds. I mean, this team supposedly had one of the best off seasons out of anyone in the whole league, but that collapsed almost as quickly as it began for many NBA fans. But despite whatever the narrative is on the Hawks today, they have a solid shot to make the playoffs and actually make some noise this year if they do a few things. And if they don't do these things, they could miss out on these playoffs completely, which is exactly what we will be discussing in today's video. As always, if you end up enjoying the content, it would be absolutely clutch if you subscribed if you're new and join the Woods crew, because we're out here posting quality videos daily, and if you enjoy this one, you will not want to miss any of the others. But with that being said, let's just get right into Trae Young, this Hawks team, and exactly what this team needs to do in order to make a solid playoffs push this year. Although I do believe that this Hawks team has improved as the season went on, I think that it's important that we discuss the season as a whole and what we've seen from this team making strides to build a solid team around Trae Young. It was clear that last offseason the Hawks really wanted to make a playoff push and prove to their young core in Trae Young and John Collins that this franchise has what it takes to build around them and allow them to win. And it was also clear that the Hawks were willing to pay guys they wanted a lot to get out their squad. I mean, we saw this team acquire Bogdan Bogdanovic, Rajon Rondo, Chris Dunn, and Danilo Gallinari in free agency, which at the time was looking like it would be huge for this team. But now that we're almost 3/4 of the way through the season, it's looking like the initial thoughts on these moves were far from the truth for this Hawks team. Don't get me wrong, I liked most of these pickups at the time. It was very clear that the Hawks needed some defense bad at the guard position, as well as guys who can be outlets for Trae Young when he needs to kick it out to a shooter. Chris Dunn and Rajon Rondo, I believe, were some of the best two-way guards the Hawks could have acquired in free agency last year, especially Rondo with his veteran presence that would be crucial in the playoffs for this young Hawks team. But despite the potential all these signings had, to say the least, they have had a very minimal impact for this Hawks team, which is one of the reasons why they have not met expectations at all for many people this year. I know, a lot of this comes down to luck. Almost all of these new additions, along with ones that were already on the team, have been injured at some point this season. We saw Chris Dunn go out almost right away, and there are now just talks of him coming back. And we've also seen guys like Gallinari, Herter, Bogdanovic, Capella, and even Trae Young himself battle injuries throughout this season. I know that injuries are a part of the game and are to be expected with this short turnaround for players who participated in the playoffs last year, but I can't help but feel the Hawks have been one of the most impacted teams out of everyone in the league, and they didn't even make the playoffs last year. What makes this situation even worse though is the fact that these new pickups really haven't had too much of an impact for this team. If you've been watching most of this Hawks team's games like I have, you know that this is the harsh truth that the Hawks fans have to face all year long. Don't get me wrong here, it's not like any of these additions have caused substantial issues to this team, but these guys were supposed to elevate the game of this Hawks team to the next level, and it's pretty transparent that they have not so far. And for those who don't believe what I just said, the trade deadline for this team is proof in itself that they weren't happy with their new additions. Because if you didn't know, the Hawks sent off Rajon Rondo to the LA Clippers in exchange for Lou Williams. And even though I believe the Hawks actually won this trade, in my eyes it shows that Rajon Rondo, one of the most potentially impactful players for this Hawks team come playoff time, just wasn't living up to what he was supposed to be. In Atlanta, well, to say the least, they did not hesitate to trade this man one bit. But despite the fact that almost all of the acquisitions by this Hawks team have fallen short so far this year, I believe this team 100% has a chance to make the playoffs and maybe even get past the first round. That is, if they are able to fix a couple things and continue to do what they have excelled in so far this year. Even though there have been some ugly moments from this Hawks team up until they got hot and started to win, I believe that there were definitely some key takeaways to take into account that show the potential this team has to win come playoff time. Basically, since Trae Young became the player of the Hawks franchise, they have been labeled as one of the worst defending teams in the league, and for good reason. For the past couple of years, the Atlanta Hawks have been close, if not dead last in defensive rating, and even though this year is somewhat similar, with the Hawks having the 24th worst defensive rating in the league at the time of making this video, actually watching the games, it is clear that they're beginning to improve. Now, don't go and run with what I just said, because I know this team is nowhere near what it needs to be on the defensive side of the ball if they want to win big games when it counts. But some of the players on this Hawks team have been taking the initiative and putting in a lot more effort, which has shown in games so far this season. Like I said, this wasn't a huge improvement, but it's a start. And if the Hawks team as a whole continue to work on this, they will be absolutely dangerous in the future. Although there have been some slight defensive improvements, it might just seem like this team is taking strides because of just how bad they were on the defensive side of the ball before. But regardless, that's not where the list of things the Hawks have been doing very well ends. Led by Trae Young, this Hawks team has been able to get an unbelievable amount of easy buckets from free throws this year, and it has been one of the key reasons why playoffs are still in this team's reach. This may not seem like a big deal, but the Hawks are the second in the league in free throw makes per game and fourth in the league for attempts, which means this team as a whole is getting a great volume of shots from the line and even greater shooting percentages. Now, even though some fouls by Trae Young have been controversial, it gets the job done as of right now, which has been big for the Hawks to say the least. And if this team can further dial in how to get to the line even more every game, this could help them a lot come playoff time. But enough of what this team has been doing well, because if you've been watching them, you more than likely have noticed at least one of the things I mentioned. Let's get into exactly what this team needs to do if they want to make the playoffs, let alone succeed in them. And some of it comes down to sheer luck, as bad as that sounds. As far as their game on the court goes, there are a lot of things this Hawks team needs to do if they want to make the playoffs, let alone get past the first round. Because even though their defense has slightly improved, like I said, this is still very well a team that will somewhat have to rely on outscoring their opponents night in and night out. And there's no better way to outscore your opponents than having a dialed in 3-ball across the board for almost every player on your team. It's no secret that one of the reasons the Atlanta Hawks haven't been playing as well as many people expected is because of their poor shooting from the 3-ball this year, and I'm not just talking about Trae Young. Honestly, Trae Young set the bar pretty high for us on what he's capable of doing from the 3 in his early years. But that's not even an excuse for him at this point. If I could choose one word to describe Trae Young's shooting this year, it would definitely be streaky. And honestly, that applies to his whole career. We have seen so many games where Trae Young is lights out and looks like one of the best shooters in the league, but there have also been many games where this man couldn't hit a shot if his life counted on it. And this has honestly been somewhat of a problem since Trae entered the league. I know, I just said that Trae Young set the bar high on himself, but that's just because people didn't know if his 3-ball would translate into the NBA level at all, kind of like Lonzo Ball before he got his jumper dialed in this year. And well, the stats about this don't really lie for Trae Young. Trae Young is actually shooting similar percentages to what he's been doing his whole NBA career, being that in his rookie year he averaged 33% from the 3, last year was 36%, and this year is 35%. Looking into those numbers actually really surprised me, because I thought that Trae Young shot the ball from beyond the arc a lot better in his first 2 years, but that was just not the case at all. And the main factor of that was his streakiness, like I mentioned earlier. If Trae Young and other key players who need to shoot the ball well like Cam Reddish can get their 3-ball to at least 38%, but in the case of Trae Young 40% or higher, this could be the exact boost this offense needs to straight up outscore their opponents like I mentioned. But even if this team is able to do everything that I talked about for the game on the court, what it really comes down to for the Hawks at this point in time is luck. What I mean by that is this team has faced so many injuries this year, it's been nearly impossible to build good chemistry and get a win streak going because there have constantly been guys in and out of the rotation. And just when it finally seemed as though this Hawks team was meshing and they got a hot streak in their recent wins, they were met with yet another injury in John Collins, who is by far one of the most relied on players along with Trae Young on this team. The key for this Hawks team will be getting their key players missing time back on the court as soon as possible, because if they don't start getting wins soon, they could be pushed out of the playoffs completely. And not only would their young talent miss out on the opportunity to win, but they would miss out on the opportunity to get some experience that is actually a lot more important than people think. All in all, I hate to see this Hawks team weighed down and plagued with injuries, but that's just how it's been around the league this whole year. I mean, look at a team like the Lakers, who are now in a very sticky situation with the injuries of their stars who they need in the playoffs desperately. If you guys would like to watch a video on that whole situation, I will link it on the screen right about now, but otherwise, thank you all so much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, it would be greatly appreciated if you subscribed if you're new and joined the Woods crew, as well as leaving a like down below. But regardless, I really appreciate all you guys still watching. Catch you all in the next one. Woods out.